In this presentation, I'll try to highlight the damage that is being caused by the work obsession of two types of people: those who work for others as employees and those who are entrepreneurs as employers. In many Asian countries, the question of identity is invariably linked to our work identity. The typical conversation between two individuals often begins with asking, where do you work and what do you do? If we ask a question, what is the purpose of your existence? Chances are that we may leave people confused. The focus on listing activities is an obsession. While it is fashionable these days to wax eloquent on work-life balance, the reality is frightening. How many of you are glued to the cell phone all the time? Have you seen someone who, even when watching a movie in a theater with his wife, once he hears the beep on his phone, loses all his poise and balance? Looking periodically into your mailbox on the phone is almost an addictive obsession with many executives. With the managers working in global organizations, getting calls or mails in the middle of the night is a very common occurrence. It has indeed become a sad reality of modern life that many are wedded to their jobs while divorced at home. When I go for a jog in the evening, I see many executives all the time peeping into their phone, expecting some mails. It is as if our identity is limited to our being a vice president or a director or a manager, and not as a husband or as a father or a son. Have you not met this manager who, even on a vacation, gets glued to his mails? I knew a manager of one of the largest banks in India who went on his annual vacation with his family, and guess what he was busy doing in the hill station? He was visiting the branch of his bank there regularly. In a very cynical way, how to occupy the leisure time has become a problem with many executives. Someone has coined a term for this phenomenon: workism. What is workism? It is the belief that work is not only necessary to economic production, but also the centerpiece of one's identity and life's purpose, and a belief that any policy to promote human welfare must always encourage more work. Added to the concept of workism is the concept of presenteeism. When job insecurity leads to employees putting in long working hours just to be seen in the office, it is known as presenteeism. Therefore, we need to ask this question: why the managers of today are burning themselves out? One possible cue is the onslaught of social media and expectation of others, which has amplified the pressure to craft an image of success for oneself, for one's friends and colleagues, and even for one's parents, family members. But literally visualizing career success can be difficult in a service and information economy. Blue-collar jobs produce tangible products like coal, steel, rods, houses, cars, and so on. The output of white-collar work, algorithms, consulting projects, advisory services, programmatic advertising campaigns, is more shapeless and often quite invisible. It is not glib to say that the whiter the collar, the more invisible the product. No wonder when a child asks his dad, why doesn't he work other than staring at the computer all the time? I talked about the expectation of others. I call it a curse that has affected almost everybody in the society. Parents are the prime culprits in projecting their expectations to their kids. Tremendous pressure is brought upon the child to compete, almost ruining his childhood. The obsession gets internalized, and the man thus gets completely enmeshed in the jobs, again to prove to himself and to others that his sole purpose of existence is work. No wonder that we are hearing cases of young executives getting heart attacks and other ailments in their 30s and 40s. Not realizing that the overwork is unproductive is the bane of many. Japan has a phrase for death by overwork, karoshi, meaning sudden death from heart failure, stroke, or committing suicide due to stress and sleep deprivation. Many entrepreneurs, high-level executives, entry-level assistants, and students wear their work ethic as if it were a badge of honor. If you are waking up earlier than your peers, working longer hours than your peers, and taking on more work than your peers, then you are getting ahead of your peers. I knew a lady who would get up in the middle of the night and send the mails to her bosses and colleagues just to prove that she has been working overtime, even in the dead of the night. In the age of hustling, we are taught to believe that the harder and longer we work, the more successful we are or will become. Now let me try to analyze the category whom we all call as entrepreneurs. It is widely held belief that successful or on the way to become successful people have a very balanced perspective about everything, for without that they would not be there where they are. They have consciously nurtured and honed their networking skills. They are assertive and have a strong mind of their own. They have strong internal locus of control and a powerful drive to achieve success in their chosen endeavors. Passion for work and risk tolerance, coupled with astute commercial sense, makes them a formidable candidate to be called a successful entrepreneur. I include among this group businessmen, film actors, politicians, and those who are on the fast lane or consider themselves to be in the fast lane. While most of the above description may be close to reality, yet a bit of scratching may reveal a completely different picture, and that has a lot to do with the influence of the biological traits over the psychological traits. All such people with high drive and ambition face potential risk of failure in their ventures during all phases of its evolution. Despite their strong achievement motivation and drive, the pressure of constantly meeting deadlines, achieving targets, if they have been invested, then showing result in the second or the third quarter, and more importantly, getting them through others, brings its own set of anxiety. Added to this is the feeling of false ego that prevents them from sharing their innermost fears and anxiety to even their near and dear ones. A recent example in India of the suicide of the famous coffee chain owner proves the point, wherein he wrote in his suicide note that he had hidden the problems even from his family members. Another problem in this context is the ever-changing goals and aspirations that constantly puts the pressure and limits satisfaction. I have personally known cases of few phenomenally successful entrepreneurs who have major problems of insomnia and have to swallow pills all the time. To complicate matters, such individuals also get into the trap of denying reality and tend to portray a very happy picture of themselves. I knew a successful entrepreneur who had set up a business empire that was talked about everywhere. He had major issues at home and also had to face a lot of business rivalry from jealous people. But outwardly, he never displayed any signs of tension. This contrasting lifestyle resulted in his untimely brain hemorrhage, and death. In such a complicated and stressful scenario, the first casualty is the work-life balance. Many entrepreneurs have not had a very happy family life, as their preoccupation with business gets skewed completely. It takes a toll on their physical health. Worse still, they are suffering an oscillation between what I call hypomania and anxiety attacks. Let me dwell here on about hypomania. Constant mood swings are a prominent feature. Entrepreneurs who suffer from hypomania become euphoric and develop momentary sense of well-being. They feel unbounded energy. They become suddenly highly creative, at times even bohemian, and full of ideas, and a result of this become irritable with others for the perceived lack of it. Their self-esteem and confidence reach unrealistic levels. Many times, this also results in promiscuous affairs as it boosts their ego. They cannot relax and develop a psychologically loud behavior. Because of these feelings and sensations, their behavior gets manifested differently at different points in time. They start taking risks which normally a prudent person should not take. Marital infidelity happens more often. They start talking a bit too much. Becoming expansive and indulging in overcommitment is a second nature to them. Often they write in a convoluted way about hopes and aspirations in their tweets and Facebook postings. They become fidgety and restless with details. In a meeting, their stance often is to order others to finish their point in 2 minutes. They have difficulty to read lengthier documents. Ideal situation to make serious errors of judgment. On the other hand, the other dimension of business stress is and anxiety is the onset of depression. In this phase, the person is unable to share his innermost fears with even his close family members, as I just pointed out. The emotional stress results in high blood pressure or ulcers. He cannot take rational and logical decisions. So what is the solution? We must realize that any business scenario is fraught with many unknown variables. Developing what I call a helicopter attitude is one way to avoid the trap of hypomania or anxiety. Metaphorically, this ability helps us to be on the penthouse, to have the aerial view or vision as we call it, and to be able to be in the basement, which I call as the day-to-day working, seamlessly fluctuating between the penthouse and a basement. One should have a detached attachment, or if you like, attached detachment with business. Our self-efficacy needs to be improved. This implies that we develop the ability to judge our actions impersonally and continuously ask why we are doing what we are doing. Such an approach is possible if we learn to meditate regularly. We must keep aside a certain portion of our time for serious introspection, reflection, and corrective action on a daily basis. This equanimous personality style will surely help us avoid the trap of hypomania and anxiety depression. I have also observed that those who discuss their business problems openly with their family members are often at peace with themselves and others than those who keep things to themselves and internalize. One of the ancient texts in India describes the state of someone who is at peace with himself and others as one who discards all selfish desires and cravings of the senses that torment the mind and becomes satisfied in the realization of the self. Such a person is said to be transcendently situated. It is important for us to understand our limitations and our possible reach. A critical analysis of our strengths and weaknesses will help us define our goals in a realistic manner. On a slightly different note, let me ask, who is your CEO? Chief Executive Officer. Whenever I have asked this seemingly straight question to managers from different geographies, I have received answers typically naming their superiors. But when I rephrase this by asking who is the CEO of your soul, I have met with bewildering faces. Indeed, most of us seem to have outsourced our CEOs outside. Talking about India, we have many holy men, millions of gods, 33 million to be precise, who have taken complete responsibility for whatever good or bad happens to us. If not them, then our fate or luck are easy scapegoats. Why is it that very few take responsibility for their actions? Our research indicates that successful people don't outsource their souls to others, but take complete ownership and responsibility for their actions. In technical jargon, they possess internal locus of control. As Howard Roark in The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand famously remarked, we can divide the meal among many men, but can we digest it in a collective stomach? We need to reflect seriously about shifting the outsourcing of soul and getting back the soul to us. Time has come for us to realize that we have several identities to us than the work title bestows on us. Each of these non-work identities have commensurate responsibilities. Balancing them is a need of the hour. Identity is actually a complex and changing representation of self. Because identity is created in relationship with others, we are not just our job. We have an identity as a son, as a daughter, as a sibling, as a spouse, as a parent, as a friend, or as a member of a society. Therefore, in conclusion, I would like to say that work identity is important, but not at the cost of our self-worth or self-esteem. We have to realize our obligations to our family, our social network, as equally critical, as these are very critical for our very survival, and we have to do constant reflection, introspection, and do mid-course correction to get the lost balance back in our life. Thank you very much.